afternoon, everyone, and welcome to August's webinar, Driving Excellence, Goal Setting, Planning, and Self-Assessing. Thank you very much for joining us today. Because it's been a couple months since we've had our last webinar, I just wanted to take a minute to go over a couple of logistics for those of you who might be new to our webinars. First of all, we always encourage questions. That's why we're here, to answer questions. But we do ask that if you have a question, to use the Q&A box to put that question in. We don't use the chat box for our webinars. And also, by putting your question in the Q&A box, only our panelists will be able to see those questions. There is a very brief survey at the end when you get off the webinar. It'll pop up automatically. It literally takes about 3 minutes to do. And we do always welcome your feedback and suggestions to help make these webinars better. Recently, people have been emailing us comments and suggestions, so that's also welcomed as well. Third, the webinar is being recorded. And next week, anyone who registered for the webinar will be receiving the recording of it, as well as the slide deck and any handouts that are referenced today. You will get those automatically by registering. As always, once we finish the webinar, it lives on our website underneath resources. If you go to the resources tab on our website and open up the drop-down box, you will see webinar archive there, and that's where this webinar will live. So if you have any technical challenges, I am the one who's on today. Amy is off for a well-deserved vacation. So if you have any technical difficulties, feel free to call my cell phone. I have it right next to me, and that's the number on your screen. So here's our agenda for the day, or for the hour, I should say. We will start off with setting the context a little bit, just answering that question of why we chose the topic. And we'll also frame this webinar in the governance standards. We will go from there into looking at concrete examples from different boards around the state on what some of these structures and systems look like. We anticipated having 4 panelists today. Unfortunately, one of them, Kathy Solsa from Rutland City, is unable to join us because of a medical emergency, and she apologizes for missing it. But nevertheless, we have 3 other boards who can share some examples about how their boards are constantly improving and aiming towards excellence. Then we'll have some questions and answers at the end, and we'll let you go about your day. I do want to say that if you have questions, feel free to always put them in the Q&A box. You don't have to wait till the end. And Sandra Cameron is monitoring the Q&A box, so she will ask the questions as we go along. I checked with Ursula. Is that okay with you, Megan? Okay. So let's begin. School boards in high-achieving districts, those where student outcomes tend to be strong, are actually different from school boards in lower achieving districts where the student outcomes are not so strong. So what are some of these actions and behaviors of school boards in high achieving districts? Well, according to a study that was conducted by the Iowa Association of School Boards called the Lighthouse Project, that looked at what school boards do in high-achieving school districts, one thing they identified that effective boards do is create a partnership with the superintendent to form a board superintendent team. And the team focuses on systemic improvement in the school system, including at the board level. This systemic improvement requires structures and processes created by school boards. And some of those processes and structures we'll be covering today. Hopefully by now, everybody is familiar with the district quality standards, better known as DQS. The research that I just cited, the Lighthouse Project, was about effective school boards and good governance, was actually used by the task force that was comprised of school board members from across the state when creating the governance standards in the district standards back in 2022. this group of school board members drafted 14 governance standards and organized them into these 3 categories that you see on your screen: governance priorities, protocols, and processes. DQS went into effect earlier this summer, July 1st. And so this webinar will be helpful to you as you go about implementing these standards. Specifically, Governance Standard 113.1.2, which is one of the governance priority standards, and it reads, at least annually, the board sets measurable goals and regularly reviews the progress toward these goals. Another one this webinar will address is part of the governance protocols, and that's the board annually assesses its performance, including adherence to agreed upon protocols, processes, and policies. And finally, Governance Standard 113.2.2, which is another protocol, reads, the board annually reviews whether and/or how its actions and contributions have impacted the school system's success in meeting goals. We are very fortunate to have with us today 3 board members who are willing and available to share with us their board structures and strategies. They have lots of great experience to share. They also have resources which you will find, which we will send out along with the recording of this webinar, and also put it on our website for you to look at your own convenience. Let me stop sharing so you can see all of our faces. We are going to start with Ursula Stanley, who is going to be talking to us about annual goals and their work plan at Washington Central. Megan will be following Ursula, and she'll also be speaking about their goals and annual work plan. But I think you're going to find some very interesting differences between the 2 boards' goals from what I heard when we were planning this webinar. So while there may seem to be some overlap, I don't feel like there is. I feel like there's some differences that will be very interesting. And then I will cover at the end board self-assessment or self-evaluations, as well as a communications plan that we use. So without further ado, I'm going to have Ursula go first, as I said, and if you don't mind just introducing us briefly and then dive right in.
I'm Ursula Stanley. I am our vice chair on the Washington Central UUSD, and our district is 5 elementary schools and 1 middle and high school. And I'm going to kind of talk about our meeting schedule real quick. We meet twice a month, the first and third Wednesdays of each month. Our first meeting is typically a community meeting. So we do board learning, public forums, presentations, and we rotate through each of our 6 schools. And then our third one is our business meeting. And I'm going to jump right into what we do with our goals. Do we have, are we going to screen share with our work plan? I wasn't sure.
I'd be happy to share it.
Okay.
Go ahead and keep talking, and
I'm going to keep talking. I'm going to talk. We do an annual retreat in 2 parts. We meet in June with our leadership team, so the superintendent and our central office and our principals, so that we can discuss how the year has gone, how we have a 5-year strategic plan. So we're able to discuss our strategic plan goals, the progress we've made towards those goals, what went well, and what we still need to work on. And then in August, we just had it last week, we meet as a board with our superintendent to work on board learning. This year it was EQS and district quality standards, typically goal setting, our work plan. So this is our work plan that are we shared?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the work plan. This year we had some really in-depth conversations on EQS changes and the district quality standards, which is why we're having this meeting. And so we've pushed having our discussion about our board goals and affirming them to our next meeting, which will be on the 20th. Our work plan, we've been using this format for about 3 years. We're heading into our 4th year with it. It's worked really well for us. It is informed by our strategic plan, the core beliefs that we have, our focus areas, which aren't measurable goals, but those also come from our strategic plan and core beliefs. But educational and academic outcomes, communication, engagement with the community, and the long-term planning to make sure that we're doing those things. So you can see in the far leftmost column, we have all of the dates of our meetings, and our admin team, people at central office, even our chair, has reviewed our meeting dates and made sure, like, compared them to religious calendars to make sure we don't have a large number of conflicts that would affect whether or not the public could attend. So all of our meeting dates go down on that first column. And if you want to scroll to like page 3, because it gets a little bit more populated there, you can see we have items in red. Those come from our budget calendar. And so our finance committee is ruled by our budget calendar and our financial oversight calendar that work in conjunction with each other. But you can see the things that are related to budget in this. But our first column, right, dates of the meetings, where we are, what time they are. The second column is presentations that we're going to have or board learning. And then we go into the next column, which is reports that we will receive. So you can see for like November 19th, we get a superintendent and leadership team report, a principal report, a student report. So we have 2 student representatives that give us what's been happening in the high school and middle school. And we can hear from some of the principals about things they've been doing in the elementary schools. We get a career center report, a community school report, and we usually do a briefing on Vermont School Board Association news. The next column is our board discussion items. And then the one to the right, so the 5th column in, is our action items. So discussion and action items typically go together on our agenda. And then our 3rd column is all about our committees. And so what you see is, so November 19th, if we take that top row, any of the committee meetings that you would be listed are the ones that are going to occur between November 19th and December 3rd. So that's how we know what's coming. Those committees will also help populate our work plan. It is a living document. You can see in blue in November 19th, there's a report coming from our Education Quality Committee. That work plan was set in June by that committee. So those items were already ready to come into our work plan, like our full board work plan. The policy committee is meeting next week, in September, early in September, and they will work on their work plan to bring in their items. And so we will start to see this populate in discussion and action with our policies that are either first readings or second readings. And then our steering committee. So we have a member from each of our 5 sending towns on the steering committee, so we can discuss how we are going to set our agendas. And we use the work plan. So we look at it, and our agendas are literally set up presentation first, followed by reports, followed by discussion and action items for the overall board. And then we get the committee discussion and action items that follow. And so it makes it really easy to populate our agenda to ensure that we're staying on track throughout the year. And when we need to flex, we can look at what we've got planned and insert things that have come up. And we all know what happens, right? Emergency maintenance stuff, a community interest in a decision you're making takes on a little bit more life, and you have to dedicate more time to it. We can look at our work plan, see what we needed to do. As you scroll in, you can see that we have our superintendent evaluation process. So we will, our next meeting, affirm our timeline and the process. And then it shows up later. We get board budget training. That's part of our budget calendar. We will have our board self-assessment is in that schedule, because we very firmly believe that if it's important, we put it on the work plan to ensure that we get it done. I've probably talked really fast and didn't use my full 10 minutes. Sorry, Debbie. I'm open to questions.
That is fine. I don't mind. We can, I just had one question of clarification for you, Ursula. So you're saying that anything that's in red has to do with the budget, and that's coming off of a different plan, which is the budget plan.
Yeah, so there's a budget calendar and timeline that we use, and actually it'll come to us either in August or early September for us to review the timeline for when we will have information, when we will talk about certain things. And a large amount of that is driven by when we can get information from various agencies and states, but we can get that baseline, what we call a baseline draft of budget of like, if we want to do the programs that we're running right now, next year with inflation, the same way we're running them, how much is it going to cost us, so that we have sort of this baseline to make our decisions and ground us. So we're trying to move into this year-round budgeting where we get some of that early information. We do annual budget training, which you probably saw very early in September, October. We put that on the calendar. Our work plan is currently empty. We have those local presentations, and that's the first Wednesday of every month. They typically tie in, I believe there's some discussion this year on having them tie into absenteeism, what's some of the contributing factors to them, and what we can do as a district. And then therefore it'll be what can we do as a board to help support the district in supporting the students that need that help. So we typically get a local presentation from each of the local schools on that subject. In the past, we've done social and emotional learning and how it's presented. This last year we did math, and they typically tie into goals that we're trying to achieve: improvements in math scores, improvements in how our students are doing in math.
Great. And I see also that your annual meeting is on here, March 2nd.
It is. And like at the very end, you can see that we have a spot without a date for our annual or our first retreat with the leadership team. There it is, June question mark, up one page.
Oh yeah.
The June question mark. Oftentimes it ends up being our first June meeting, but it really very much depends on the cycle that the leadership team is in with they'll do a retreat themselves and then come in with us so that we can talk and have that review of how we've done.
Great. And then this highlighted area is just because it's important that there's special training for new board members.
It is new board members. So we would do a lot of our onboarding. Big plug for the VSBA onboarding information. Great.
Thank you. This is great. I love it. And I also love how you put your focus areas at the top as a reminder of what your board is focusing on for the year.
Yes.
Great.
Debbie, we have one question.
Perfect. Go ahead, Sandra.
It says, I'm curious about the process you use for setting annual goals before you create the work plan.
We discuss some of our annual goals will come from committees, and some of it comes from our district goals. We have not as a board talked, so I don't want to throw things out there. Like I have ideas that we can bring up at our next meeting. But like I said, this year where we would have talked about it at our retreat, we had a very robust conversation about EQS and the district quality standards that are driving this webinar. And we decided that it was time to table the board goals to move in, but we would have a robust conversation about what do we need to do to move forward with our district goals. In that, so one of the district's quality standards is annually reviewing student achievement. Our board in the past had goals to create a student achievement monitoring plan, and that came from Ed Quality, the Ed Quality Committee. I am the chair of the Ed Quality Committee. I do have quite a bit of knowledge of how we've done that. We have developed that monitoring plan and what we expect, hence the 4 reports to the full board on various achievement data and how our students are doing. And now that goal from that committee is to find a way to line it up with all of the other monitoring plans. So we have our Humanity and Justice Coalition that does a cycle of discussions and looking at data review. We have our continuous improvement plans that have to be done annually, and we want to align it so that the district is looking at the information together. And so that is our goal for Ed Quality this year. It just hasn't been discussed by the full board yet. So
stay tuned.
Yes.
Ursula, are you, is your board willing to share your great work with other boards? Is that something we can send out?
Yeah, so I shared with Debbie a PDF of that draft. We would probably be able to share a copy. I would want to ask, obviously, to share like a copy. It's just a Google Word document set up with columns and the table. And then it can be adapted to work for you, for each board. But I can double check that we can do that. But I think the PDF is going to go out.
It will automatically.
Okay.
Yep. Good. Terrific. So we're going to move on from Washington up further north to Champlain Valley. And Megan Metzler is going to talk to us about what her board does in terms of annual planning, goal setting and annual planning. And Megan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Debbie. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Metzler. I'm the chair of the Champlain Valley School District Board. We have 6 schools and 5 towns. So we have our high school, we have 3 K-8 throughout our district, we have a K-2, and we also have a 3-8 in our district. And that serves approximately 3,800 students in the Champlain Valley. Ursula, when I was looking at your work plan, I thought, wow, that looks familiar. Our work plan looks very familiar. It looks a lot like that. So I'm glad to see that we are in good company with you. But more broadly, I wanted to share a little bit more about what my board does in order to set our goals and our planning. So we actually had a retreat in May, and I was talking before this started with Debbie and Ursula that we have found that it's really hard to find times in the summer when everyone can meet, although I do have a board meeting this evening, to really spend time and have a retreat overall. So we actually have our retreat in May, around the end of May, right before school lets out. And that is really an opportunity for our board to look at what our goals were that we set in the beginning of the year, think about what we've done, look at the evidence and what we've pulled together to address those goals overall, and then think about what are the changes that we want to make for our goals next year. Debbie, this was kind of late, but I just shared a file with you called FY20 draft FY26 board goals. If you could share that, that would be helpful. And this is actually a public document that we'll be discussing today as a board in my meeting tonight. So tonight is our first meeting of the board overall. And to provide some more context, we have spent some time as a team talking about what should our goals look like back in May. And this is my first attempt to try and say, okay, we met in May. This is what I think we as a board have said our goals should look like for FY26. And I think it's important that kind of the introductory paragraph really takes us back to our strategic plan and our vision and our mission and what we're doing overall. And that is the key in what we're trying to do as a board. And one of the first things that we'll actually do today is we are a board that works with committees. We're not a policy governance committee board. We have 4 different committees. So we have a finance committee, an indicators committee, which sounds like Ursula's educational outcomes committee, but it's really a overall monitoring kind of data. They dig deep into the data. We have an HR committee and we have a policy committee. And the first thing that we're going to do tonight is we are going to reaffirm the charge of each of those committees. So every year, annually, we reaffirm the charges of all of our committees, who the chairs are, and all of our members. And I know sometimes people will do that a little bit closer to town meeting day, but we have found that is, new board members are very, very new right then. We're in the middle of an academic year, and it actually makes a lot more sense for us with a 12-member board. We're big enough that we can kind of wait until the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of today, we're going to spend our time just reaffirming as a board what the charges are of all of our committees. And once we do that, we're going to spend some time thinking about what our board goals are. And you'll see that the board goals that we have really are about they're in line. They're very similar to what we had last year. We think it's important as a board that we're not changing our goals and changing what we're asking of our superintendent every year. It shouldn't be wholesale something new every year. We have a strategic plan, we have goals, and we want to continue to work on them every year. So the first you'll see is monitoring. So the key goal that we have here as a board is we want to continue to monitor and refine key metrics and outcomes related to student and employee growth and belonging. And that goes right back to our strategic plan and what our mission and our vision are. So that is our overall goal. And we have, when we get to our work plan, which I will not share because that is still very much draft, you'll see the different reports throughout the year that we're going to do that and how we plan to do that. Ursula, I'm really interested in the 4 different reports that you're going to share with your board. I'd love to hear what they are. I think that would be a great start. But one thing that my board has been really focused on, and we've been working really closely with our superintendent and others, is what are the key metrics? What matters most to us and takes us back, not just to test scores, but really the overall vision of our district, which is growth and belonging. And it's really hard to calculate belong or to assess or monitor something like belonging when you have, from VT-CAP scores, right? So we've spent a lot of time, and it's been a real focus of our administration and of our indicators committee to think about what are the things that matter most to us. And we spent a lot of time on that last year. And this year, we're just continuing to refine it and refine it and refine it. And I think we're getting closer and closer. And I'm really excited about that. Policies is another. And obviously our indicators committee will be the most important part for that. Policies, our policy committee will reach out. And obviously I've reached out to all the chairs of the committees for this as well. They're going to monitor and develop policies that support our students, employees, and community. And that's really broad. But if you looked at our plan for last year, we were very specific about what policies we really wanted to focus on. And I think we've done that for several years. And at this point, we're at a point where we really need to go back and refresh all of our policies because some of them have actually been around for quite a long time, back from when we consolidated as a district back in 2017. So this is really focused on the monitoring. Where are we? And we're going through tonight. I think we're looking at 7 different policies that need to be refreshed. During our retreat, we spent some time saying, like, do we really need a budget goal? And we all kind of laughed because of course we need a budget goal. But what I think is important is that this goal needs to align with our mission and our vision, and it needs to provide an equitable distribution of resources to help meet the needs and goals of every student. And that's really specific because that's also what's in the governance standards, which I'll get to in a minute. So that's just, we're being very, very clear that our goal is not just to develop a budget, but it's to take it that extra step. Employees is an area of our strategic plan as well. And last year, we had 2 different goals. Last year, our goal for our HR committee was that we wanted to, we needed to identify a permanent superintendent, which we did. And we also had a faculty, a teacher staff contract. So this year, this focus is really on negotiating the contracts of overall staff. And they also help us to evaluate the superintendent, but that's kind of what we do, and that's included on the work plan. And as we talk about employees, I think it's really important that our monitoring is not just metrics and outcomes related to students, but it's also employees. So that's what you'll also see in monitoring. So it's not just give them a contract, but it's also looking at how are they doing, what are the things that we're doing well. And if you go down, communications, we also have a communications goal, and we have 2 goals here that I think no one would be surprised by. We have a new communications manager from last year, and I think we as a board have done, or as a district, we've done a really good job of communicating about our budget. But now we're really starting to think about what is our district level communication strategy. And that's not something that the board is going to do. The board is not going to come up with our district level communication strategy, but we're going to monitor that. We're going to make sure we understand what it is that we're doing. We're going to provide insight when it comes to things for the board to do. That is how we will be communicating locally and statewide about the impact of Act 73 on CVSD students. So it's kind of a 2-pronged approach of what we want to do from a communications perspective. And then finally, governance standards. I added governance standards last year because they are now effective July 1st. And that was really important to us as a board to think about how are we going to apply all these governance standards. And if you look at the plan, as you'll see, we've gone through and identified every governance standard at the district level, and we have identified what are we going to do that addresses each of those. And I have a separate document that kind of lays out the specific what we will do for each of those other items as well. So I think a good place to look at that as well, Debbie, is if you go to, this is from last year, I've shared a file with you saying FY25 board goals to work plan. So this is from last year. We haven't gotten there quite yet. It was the second one that I shared. I might have to share it again. Oh, there it is.
Yep. There it is.
Yep.
I got it.
So once we set, so tonight as a board, we are going to talk about, we will make sure everyone agrees on what our committee should be doing. We will talk about our goals and make sure we're on the same plan. We're also going to, in line with our in line with the governance standards. We have actually not had written operating protocols in place, so we're going to discuss operating protocols tonight as well. I think we've always known what they are, but we will have it in our work plan that we will do that. But last year, as I was going through our process for as I was going through this, I was like, what? Well, I have my goals, I have a work plan, I have governance standards. I need to make sure I have a plan that addresses all of these things. So what we will do, what we did last year, and I thought this was really helpful, is we said, what are our goals? How does it align to our strategic plan? What are the governance standards? And then when are we going to do it throughout the year? And once I added in those extra columns about making sure that I was thinking about governance standards and when it would happen, and then you could click on the work plan, but that would show you exactly when it was going to happen. And that was really my triangulation of all the things that I felt like we as a board are being asked to do. How do I know that we're doing it and we're doing it well and with fidelity? So that was really helpful to us, and I'll be spending time after tonight's board meeting when I have more clarity on what the board goals are. I have a draft work plan that we've started, but we're going to do this again because it's a really good way to think about what are all the things we need to do, and that you don't end up at your retreat at the end of the year going through the governance standards and saying, wait, we were supposed to assess the effectiveness of our communications as a board. And that's Debbie knows the words exactly. I don't. But we were supposed to do this and we didn't do it. And that is really how we make sure when we set out for the year that we have a plan to do it. So, and for any governance standards that weren't covered by the first 5, that was really how I thought about what are the other things that we're going to be doing, including VSBA trainings in order to make sure we have board education appropriately. And if you go through our board documents, you'll find references to a lot of different things, and I'm happy to share how we did that. And then that ultimately we signed when we approved our work plan last year, which doesn't happen till October, which feels a little late to me, but I feel like it's really important to follow these processes to make sure we have a full plan. Once we sign off on our work plan, we know that if we follow the plan and we do what we need to do and we do it with the appropriate level of preparedness, we are in really good shape to meet our goals. And then something will happen and we will have to address it. But we feel like we've really set the stage appropriately. So that's our plan.
Sounds great. I love how you've done you've aligned your goals with the governance standards. I think that's really great.
Yep.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I also think it's so different. I've never heard about goals being static like that just carry on year to year to year. But
they change a little bit. They change a little bit, but we started keeping them, we started thinking like, we don't want to, we expect, one thing I've learned as a board member who's not an educator is things take time in education, and things take, it's a lot of things that we want to, like nothing is going to, very few things change things change quickly all the time, but long-term planning, long-term strategies require long-term goals, and moving that as long as you're moving forward towards what your strategy is and your long-term goal is, I think you're in the right place.
Yep. That's us. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the role of the board is really to support those district goals, which tend to be student outcomes. So it's important that you, understand that while you're not actually implementing those goals, you are providing those essential services like communications and budget and everything else that to help ensure that those goals are met, those district goals are met.
Yeah, and we're there to partner with our superintendent. We're there to monitor we're there to monitor everyone, to monitor everything, to make sure that we're moving forward. And if we're not moving forward, that's our stop to say, hey, wait a minute, we're not moving forward here. We identified this we all worked really hard to identify this as the metric we felt was most important. What are we doing to make sure that we're moving towards that?
Yeah, monitoring is a big piece of the board's work as well. Yep. Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and talk a little bit about board self-evaluations. So, are you seeing my screen again? Yeah, good. So what is a board self-evaluation? Quickly, basically, it's a means by which a board or a superintendent and board governance team can pause, reflect, and examine the essential elements of itself, such as the board structure and the quality of team functionality. A board self-evaluation serves as a vehicle in which a board and or the governance team, again, the governance team being the superintendent and the board, can critically examine its strengths as well as its areas for growth, while making adjustments that promote that continuous board improvement that we're always aspiring to do. A board self-evaluation can also help a board in gathering perceptions of all board members, fostering dialogue, improving the board's understanding of its role and decision-making processes. It can help strengthen the team relationship. It can improve the board structures and processes, and also identify next steps for board learning and growth. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of 2 evaluations that my board does. I'm the chair of the Barstow Unified Union School District Board, which is a pre-K through 8 district. We are a choice district for high school, and we are in a side-by-side arrangement with the Otter Valley Unified Union School District. So together, Otter Valley and Barstow make up the Rutland Northeast Supervisory Union, and we are about 1,500 students in that SU. So my board, Barstow, is a policy governance board. And so you will see some language that may look a little different from what you're used to seeing, but don't worry, it's still very relevant to all types of governance. So I will point out those differences and those variances when we get to them. So I'm going to first show you a meeting evaluation form that we use. And we basically strive to do this at the end of each meeting, which sounds like a lot, but it's not an onerous task. It really takes about 5 to 10 minutes to do. And of course, we don't always do it because sometimes, especially during budget season, things get a little bit crammed. But it is our goal to try to do it at least every other meeting, if not every meeting. And what we have found is that it's very helpful in identifying behaviors from that meeting itself that are both desirable and undesirable. And that could be behaviors of individual board members as well as the whole board itself. And by identifying those behaviors, especially kind of the undesirable ones, at that moment, it helps to prevent a one-time action from becoming a habit. And it kind of checks or even stops it before it becomes a bigger issue. I kind of tell the board it's like a formative assessment where we're getting feedback on our behavior as a board in order to help us improve and do better at the next meeting. And I think it's really important to point out that we are assessing ourselves, but we also ask for input from the superintendent because I think that's really helpful to get that kind of unbiased perspective about how they observed our behavior at that meeting. So let me just show you what that form looks like. So see, it's very short. It's 5 questions. And we have the date at the top. At the beginning of the meeting, we ask one of the board members to be in charge for completing the form. It's a Google Doc, so they can just do it online, and then it's shared. It's already been shared. It was actually created by the executive assistant in the central office. So she gets the document and can upload it and make sure it's saved. 5 simple questions. This again kind of focuses more from the policy governance point of view, but I think again, the questions are quite relevant. How did the board focus on the future of the district through its ends policy? You could insert the word vision instead of ends policy. And then we actually ask for concrete examples of how the board does this. How did the board look for ways to do ownership linkage? And ownership linkage, again, is one of those terms from policy governance, but it basically means community outreach or community engagement. And again, we want to cite specific examples of how we did that during the meeting. Did the board refer to any policies for items on tonight's agenda? Identify those policies that were explicitly referenced during the meeting. And did the board follow the board agenda and remain in the role of governance rather than operations? See how that's relevant to any board. It's not just a policy governance board. And that one is actually the one that we really value the feedback of our superintendent And they sometimes will have examples where we kind of veered a little bit outside of our lane into theirs. But again, it's the whole point is to really get that feedback right away so that it doesn't become a bad habit. And then we're all board members prepared and participatory. So this is also very helpful feedback, especially as the chair, for me to understand whether everybody felt like they were given a chance to participate during the meeting. And then the optional questions is, we always say, is there a topic that you would like to see the board explore at a future meeting, and any other comments. So really quick, doesn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes, unless there is something, a little red flag, then it sometimes does require a little bit more discussion. All right, so back to the PowerPoint. So the second type of evaluation that we do is called the annual board evaluation. And this basically is something that we do once a year. It's more similar to an evaluative, I always have a hard time with that word, evaluative assessment of the board. We do it in the month of February, so our last meeting before the board term's over. And it takes a little bit longer, and we do ask the board members to do the form or do the questionnaire before we come to the meeting so that people have already had that chance to think about it and be kind of reflective on the questions. And then we open it up to a board discussion. And the purpose of this board is, or of this evaluation, is really to see how well have we been practicing good governance. Is it good governance? Or are we just thinking it is? And any kind of big lessons learned that we can apply to the coming year. So here's the example of what that looks like. We even call it a board annual effectiveness review because we like to focus on that word effectiveness. Like, are we really effectively governing the district? And so this is very much based on policy governance, but where we have these questions and we ask whether we're in compliance with these things, yes, no, partial, and then we always ask for evidence and notes to back it up. So that's basically a 2-pager. And like I said, done by individual board members ahead of time and then discussed at the following board meeting. So that's what I've got for board self-evaluation. Sandra, I think you have a hand up, or somebody does.
Yes, there's a question. Can
Yep.
you explain how you do the meeting evaluation again? Is this done as a whole board, individual members?
It's just it's a conversation that the board has at the end of the meeting. We will open up the floor. We'll just take the questions one at a time. And there is that one board member that has volunteered at the beginning of the meeting. We always ask somebody to volunteer to be a timekeeper, and then the second person to be the board evaluator. And basically what they're doing is they have that document opened on their screen, and they're just typing in the comments and feedback that the other board that we're sharing. Yeah, but it's very casual. It's more of a conversation than anything else.
Thank you. That's all the questions we have right now.
Super. I have one more slide to show you. I won't open up this document, but you'll have the link when you get the slides. Basically, what I have is a document that is called the Power of Positive Governance, a resource guide to assist school boards in their governance role. And on pages 27 to 36, this is what it looks like, all blurry. I'm sorry about that. They have sample self-evaluation questions for boards. So if you don't have a board self-assessment right now, don't worry about it. There's tons of resources out there, including this one that you're going to get. And I'm sure that any board that you know, such as mine or other boards that you know that do self-assessments, they'd be welcome to share their tools. They'd be happy to share their tools with you. So don't feel like you've got to reinvent the wheel. There are good examples out there. And then I just wanted to show you a screenshot of what our annual work plan looks like. We I will include the whole thing as an attachment to the webinar, but basically it looks a little bit similar to what Ursula showed us. We put our annual goals up at the top as well, which I think is quite handy so that we don't forget what our goals are. And we plan by the month, going down there, just like she did, like at Washington Central. And going across, you have the different categories or the different agenda items, if you will, kind of categories of agenda items. And so think again, the middle part of this, the middle columns, ends monitoring, executive limitation, board management, delegation, and governance process is very particular to policy governance. However, the things that are common to, I'd say, all boards is you could have a column on board development and education. This is something we try to do every month. We do it through a variety of means. And then consent agendas is something that a lot of boards around the state have. So we list the items that are going to be on our consent agenda. And then moving over to community engagement, we do a lot of community engagement. It's one of the core principles of a policy governance board is constantly engaging with your community. So we list the different events that are happening. And then we have also what we call a community engagement plan, which I can show you if we have time. I'd rather have questions than show you another document, but it'll definitely be as a handout as well. But it's basically a communication plan that shows the different community events that are happening throughout the year and which board member is going to attend or participate in that meeting. And then incidental information is another column that you may want to consider having on your work plan. And then, as I mentioned before, we do a board self-evaluation at each meeting. So we just list that there as a reminder. And what I love about this work plan, and probably it helps Ursula, and maybe to a lesser extent, but probably for you as well, Megan, is that once you have a really solid work plan, those meeting agendas almost write themselves, right? I mean, it's our agenda planning meeting since we have, I mean, this took us years to develop, and it still could be improved, I'm sure. But once it got into good shape, I feel like my meetings with the superintendent each month when we plan the next meeting, the agenda planning meeting is really brief and efficient because you basically have the whole year mapped out. So I can't say enough about the importance and the value of having an annual work plan. And it does take time to set up and the first time you do it, it will feel a little wonky. But again, you don't have to start from scratch. You have many, many examples out there that you can use, modify to fit your board. So yeah. And then this is, if you want to see the ownership linkage or the community engagement plan, I can show that to you as well, unless we have some questions.
There are no questions right now.
Okay, I'll take a quick peek at this. So we call it our ownership linkage plan. Again, it's a communication plan. This is specific to the board, to the budget season. So we do have one for the whole year, but then we have a shorter one for around the budget season. And you can see this was last year's when we listed the date, the time of the meeting, the location, the event, and then which board member was going to attend. And sometimes it was also with the superintendent. So this worked really well for us, and we would just take a peek at it at the different at our meetings to see what was coming up, making sure that board member who said they're going to do it was on ready to do the event. And then also it's important when the event is over, if anything of note happened at the event, that board member have an opportunity to share out with the board what happened, anything of note, and share that with the board at the following meeting.
Debbie,
So this is
when
very
you
helpful.
clicked on it, it didn't open. If you meant
Oh,
to,
it didn't?
no.
Oh, how strange. Let me stop sharing the share again. that work?
Yes, thanks.
Sorry about that. You can see the transfer station is always a favorite one because it's usually 20 below zero. You have to stand outside, but it's well worth it. And we try to do that one a couple times because that's where you see everybody. So that's basically what it looks like. And again, I'll share this with as a resource, as a handout.
We do have a question.
Sure.
Is there a specific requirement for school board professional development hours to be documented?
Megan or Ursula, do you want to take that or do you want me to?
I'm not aware of a requirement to document my professional development hours, though as chair, I know I'm required to do so with the superintendent for 8 hours a year, and I've done so, but no one has asked me to provide proof of that. So let me know if I'm wrong, Debbie.
And I was gonna say from the board end, like when you talk about board learning and board education and board development, so far there isn't a requirement, but we should be mindful that we're all waiting for that evaluation form that we're supposed to fill out and send to the AOE to come. And they may, but we don't know, ask like number of hours. And I don't know if they're going to have metrics for number of hours, what percentage of participation occurred. But right now there aren't any documentation requirements except for the specific chair superintendent.
Even then, I was not asked to. Yeah.
You're not getting certificates like you do with PD hours or.
No, right. I have a different professional license and I have to maintain all of that. And I don't, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. So the only mandated training that boards have is that chair, it's called joint chair superintendent training. And that's on an annual basis. 8 hours are required every year for the board chair and the superintendent to learn together. And there's topics that are listed in the law that are mandated. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think anybody has ever asked for documentation on it. It's kind of a good faith type of thing. Yeah, there's no mandated requirement, no mandated training for board members other than that board chair. So it's always a good idea to do that continual learning. We don't want to diminish the importance of that. I think it's important. I feel like school board service is one of those things where you never really stop learning. There's always something more to be learned, especially as things change. But yeah, it's kind of a good thing to do. And as Ursula said, we are waiting for those proficiency standards, the rubrics to come out for the governance standards to see what the proficiency standard will look like for continuous board learning. And so that we can all be meeting that standard. Anything else that anybody has any questions about or anything they want to share?
What other questions here?
No other questions? Good. Well, we are 5 minutes to 1, so we could say we're done and give everybody 5 minutes of their day back, which would be grateful to go eat your lunch or do other things. But before we go, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Ursula and Megan very much for your time and preparation for doing this webinar. I think it's so important. I think these practical tools are things that will be very useful to our board members, and especially as we're moving into a new year. I think the timing's perfect for goal setting and annual work planning. Never too late to do it, and never too late to start. But thank you for sharing your expertise with all of us today. And I wish everybody the best end of summer and a great welcome back to school. We'll be having our next webinar on September 11th, which will be about the resolutions, the proposed resolutions, and we'll have a presentation of what those resolutions are. So we look forward to seeing you on September 11th, if not before. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.